mean,
I'm
I'm
giving you the clap, and then I'm going to go back and
Lovely.
I'm going to open the video up with that. Rich's dad is giving us the clap.
One more time. That's close enough.
We've been clapped.
We have been clapped.
Been served.
Yeah, exactly. So welcome. My name's Rich. I'm Team Slide United. This season I spotted and was kind of crew chief. If you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm John, one of the Slide United team members, driver of the S14 that drove this year in ProAm, and mostly what this recap's going to be all about.
I'm Chris, one of the newest additions to the Slide United team, kind of helping out John with being on this crew.
Frank, mechanic on the team, been friends with Rich for years, so.
So what we're hoping to do today is just kind of like recap how we got into last season. It's kind of an interesting story, I think at least. And then how the season went, because we kind of went in with a plan, did a lot of prep, executed pretty well. I mean, I think we're all pretty happy with the outcome. Just kind of get into it. So I guess we should start with kind of how do we get into doing Pro-Am this year? Because there's quite a little build up to that.
There's quite a lot of build-up, actually. I've always wanted to compete in a racing series in general. I tried to do it in Time Attack, did some SCCA and stuff like that, but never got to do a full season, whether it's even if it's at one track, because Central Florida SCCA only does it at pretty much Sebring and like a race at Daytona. So when I came back and moved to Orlando, is like, I will get into drifting and I will do a competitive drift season, whatever that looks like, when it happens, when the time is right. So that buildup was move to Orlando. I bought a sim. I bought a cheap 350Z that needed some work, and that's where it started 3 years ago.
So for me too, I really hadn't been around Pro-Am at least since like Three Palms days, like 2016. I mean, I've been, been watching, but I hadn't participated in it because I really went from Three Palms to like being on Team Injuku with FD Pro. So it was like a fun opportunity for me also, like with one of my best friends to kind of like help out and get involved and I don't know, see where we could go. Especially after I saw you start driving, going from sim to physical drifting, like you picked it up immediately. And then I definitely was seeing like signs, even though, you hadn't had the seat time yet, but like I could see the little signs there that, oh man, like John could have it. Like he's smooth, consistent, you don't make many mistakes for very long. If you make one, it's like you're real good about figuring it out and moving on. So yeah, it was exciting for me to want, and the opportunity to do it with you. So.
And maybe one thing to note too was, back in 2019, there was no local competition drift series.
Yeah.
The first one that came up was Clutch Kickers. Clutch Kickers popped up first, and it was, okay, I hope I get out of school and finish the car in time to make it, which didn't happen. But at the same time, that's when Jackson was able to start FD Pro-Am for Florida.
So speaking of the car, right, you want to talk a little bit about that? Because the car you got and then it sat on ice for a little while due to like deployment. And so
yes, so I forget what year I bought the car, but let's just say I bought Taylor Hull's old S14 chassis when he switched to the Cadillac. When he was after he purchased the Cadillac was when that car went up for sale, and I went to Georgia and immediately picked it up. I was hit up by Rich, Michelotti, Duarte, and somebody else telling me, go buy this car now. So I listened and I went and bought the car now. I was up there 2 days later after it was for sale.
Yeah, I just got a picture. Okay, got it.
Yep.
Yeah.
As soon as I got the car, this was also my first drift car build. So this was where I was going to start learning to drift. So there's definitely been parts that I've bought that never used and I sold. But the power plant was always going to be V8. Wanted it to be V8, and didn't have knowledge of anything. And this is 8 years ago or so. So I picked up the only LS I was able to find at a performance shop that was just sitting in the corner. Had no idea what it was. It's clearly the 4-point great, I'm going to call it. It's survived. So it was a 4.8. And then everybody and their mother was telling me, oh, the transmission to get was an F-body T56. So there you go. That was the start of that. And then it sat on ice at my house, sat on ice in a trailer in a storage yard, sat at a buddy's shop in Miami while I was deployed for a year. And it just kind of collected parts through the years that it needed. And they sat in boxes in the trailer or inside the car, and it just never got past a rolling chassis, pretty much.
So you said something too that was a good point, because I forget now, like especially like in hindsight, I forget that car was like the first real build to that extent by far you've ever done. Like you've never built a car.
I made the classic mistake that we tell everybody to not make, which was I want to go drifting. I'm gonna do an LS swap S chassis. That is exactly what I did, and it took me 9 years.
It was
about 9 years or so to make it happen. Because I started with a different shell before this one, technically, which I got rid of. So it was the entire floor pan on both the passenger and driver side was completely rusted. So whoever was drifting it before literally was flopping around in the seat because it wasn't connected to the unibody side of the chassis.
Yeah. So then it becomes apparent that okay, like we got the time, we got the car, we go to that. So we go a couple of years ago, go to the OSW event. We kind of knew we wanted to run Pro-Am. You get you in. So we kind of like checked it out.
I'll pause you there.
Sure.
So the real green light was when Jackson announced.
Yeah.
In December after SEMA. So I mean SEMA's going on right now, time of this recording. But he didn't get green light from FD until about a month later in early December to announce that he had the rights to do his own FD Pro-Am series in Florida. So the car had been in my garage at a year at that point because it was like, when I have some time, I'll work on it and kind of chip away at it. And we did very, very slowly. But it was more of a convenience of getting done for clutch kickers rather than a push. When Jackson announced Pro-Am, it turned into, I need to get this car done not as fast as possible, but done as correctly, as quickly as possible.
Yeah, we said that's right. It's a good point. I forgot about that too. That was announced. So then it was on, instead of like you said chipping away at it, it was like, okay, put a plan in place. What are we gonna do? We have, even though it was Taylor Hull's car, what ended up happening was we pretty much kept the cage in it just to kind of bring things up to date, up to spec. We had to source some stuff.
There was some old rules or there was new rules that were in place. For example, the S chassis windowsill in the rear, that wasn't a rule back when Taylor was running the car in 17, 18, and 19. So that was something that was not hard to fix on the car, but it was hard to figure out how we were going to even do it in the first place.
Yeah, so it turned into really taking that car down to a caged shell, basically, again. Taking all the rear radiator stuff, just like cutting it all out. Because at that point, when we're that deep into it, it's like we might as well just, we had some ideas of what we would probably want to do, and it was like, okay, we might as well just do it. We're already this far into it.
Well, simply put, the rear is a great example. We know that if we were to do it again, and we will be, the fuel cell needs to go in between the strut towers. But with the way that the cage was done, we would have to make more than the major modifications we were fixing on the car anyways to do that. So it turned into, okay, this is what we have. What is acceptable and close enough to right that we can do? So, fuel cell kind of moved a little bit, but it wasn't in between the strut towers. And the radiator moved to accommodate and change the direction that it was pulling air. so we weren't superheating my fuel cells and just old stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's like it was like the whole build philosophy around us, redoing that chassis was kind of a good enough, in the time frame and there was to a minimum standard, but kind of good enough to get it where we felt like we needed it, but not dive, because it still was an old FD chassis and had old FD chassis, issues. You can't get around that.
Remember, it was completely crashed into the OSW wall the year that I bought it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it is what it is. That's what happened. So we got it good enough. 4.8, 4-point great.
Yes.
Goes in it. It's got. So technically, the 4.8 has a cam, which is why it lobes a little bit. But I say like air quote because
it just doesn't sound like a truck motor, but it makes truck motor horsepower.
Exactly. It might make like 5 more wheel horsepower than a truck motor with a stock cam would make.
Per the truck that I got it from, it to the wheel made 5 more than what the paper says it makes at the crank.
Yeah, right. So
on the 85.
Yeah, yeah. So that was not going to cut it. So we added a lot of nitrous.
Yeah. So from watching Clutch Kickers and other lower end competition series, let's say, we understood that at a minimum on paper, we wanted to be in the low to mid 400 horsepower range to be at least competitive to some degree. Anything below that, we could, it's like a 350Z on nitrous. Sure, it can go out there and complete runs and do the job, but when the spread of the field is so wide from 600 plus down to 400, it just at some point you're outclassed and there's nothing you can do about it. But if we're at a minimum of that mid 400 horsepower range, we can at least have a trying chance at some of those higher cars if we got there. So that's why we added the nitrous with the anticipation that, with the thought that we were going to make 450-ish, and we did. We made 411.
Yeah, so on a 125 shot.
Yes.
All the nitrous. Yeah, we're making 411, and nitrous is making now up like just over 25% of the total horsepower.
It's 36% of the horsepower of the car is on nitrous.
Yeah. So pretty difficult to get around to drive, but we figured it out. So we go into. So I guess we go into 2022 now. We did try to do one event, which we.
Yeah. So we'll take one step backwards and say that December of 21, Jackson announced it. We pressed hard on the gas button or the gas pedal to get the car done. And the minimum requirement for success was the backwards plan from the last event.
Right.
And as long as we met all those goals, we were going to at least show up for one round and get my feet wet, because I've never done anything at this level, both car and, competition-wise. Like, we have to show up and just get a feel. It doesn't matter how bad it goes.
Yeah, basically we went there and said, okay, like, we just want to qualify. Just show up and qualify. Which, there was an issue there.
We didn't.
But that was the goal. That one event was like, show up, get a feel for it, get a lay of the land, see what the car does on track, kind of in that environment. Because you're just not, in a fun day, you're just not going to get a competition, environment. It's just not going to happen. Like, you're really only going to get it there, where people are driving like that hard in a very specific way. So to kind of see where we stacked up with all that.
So I'm going to caveat on that and say, while the event was a total failure as far as meeting goals and actually showing up to drive, because I didn't qualify.
And it was the first time you'd driven in the rain.
It was the first time I've driven in the rain as well. But it checked all the other boxes for why we had to show up in the first place. This is what the environment's going to be like. This is what the pits are going to be like. This is the pace of what the event is going to be like. This is what's going to happen when it rains, because that's something I never experienced at any events that I'd driven at before. It was also good to just watch the end season, because this is the last round, It was technically 3 and 4, but for round 4, I basically sat there and waited for the rain and watched the competition, which there was no rain, bummer. But anyways, kind of learned that, if I'm capable, I should up the power in the car.
Yeah, we kind of figured out real fast. The 4.8 with that much nitrous was not ideal. I mean, we knew that anyway, but it was absolutely cemented.
And
not ideal.
Well, we knew it was not ideal. We didn't know how not ideal until about round 2 this year, which we can talk more detail about.
Well, so coming out of that kind of get our feet wet event in 22, we swapped the motor.
Yes, I found a L92 on Facebook Marketplace for a good price. So for those that don't know, an L92 is a 6.2 liter aluminum block LS out of a Cadillac. Basically, it's the cheap man's LS3 is what it is. It technically only had 74,000 miles on it. It had a mild cam, and part of that cam was the cylinder deactivation, lifter delete and whatnot. So I thought that this was what I could budget to upgrade the car for next year. Even with the not a proper cam, it was going to be enough for what I needed to do for 2023.
Yeah, and 2023 was for us was always a matter of collecting data. If we were competitive, great, but really the core goal for us kind of in that time frame leading into this year, what ended up being this year, was okay, let's get the experience, let's get data, let's kind of so that we can take it into really 2024. That's always been kind of the overarching plan, right? So test with we test with the 6.2, and it's completely different, right? We love it.
So we loved it until we didn't.
Well, I think it didn't love us is what happened.
Yes.
It just wasn't a mutually
one-sided love.
It was a mutual relationship, if you know what I mean.
So when we went to the dyno, and remember 4.8 on 125 Strata nitrous made 411 wheel. The 6.2 with the unknown really mild cam made 455 no nitrous.
Yeah.
So I was already making more horsepower than the 4.8 without nitrous.
Yeah.
And then on nitrous, we made 582, something like that. But the torque number was insane. We were over 600 foot-pounds of torque.
Yeah.
It was wild. So, and that was the same with the same 125 shot. So I didn't want to change any of the tuning on the nitrous with the fuel and the fuel tables and stuff. So now I'll step forward into the test day. Being able to run third gear on the skid pad with the T56 and the stock 4.08 rear diff was like night and day. I didn't have to be driving it like a 350Z floored and clutch kicking it. It just drove.
Yeah, you had pedal resolution for the first time, like with a V8 in that car. Because before that, it's an on-off switch, right? It's like all the power, some of the power. Yeah. So you actually have to, you could ease off the pedal 10%, and you didn't completely lose it all.
You mean I could ease off the pedal 50% and actually massage the car more nicely in the corner, and then roll back into it instead of maybe a clutch kick or a stab with a left foot brake while still staying floored. All those other little tricks in the book to keep the car where it's supposed to be.
So the 6.2 was not in love with us.
Correct. So at the very end of the event, it decided to totally catch the entire car on fire. It pushed a push lock oil line completely off, the filter returned to the motor for some reason. And because I also run an AccuSump, that AccuSump also saw a drop in oil pressure. So 3 quarts of oil from the AccuSump, plus whatever the motor is pulling and pushing through the oil cooler to go back into the motor, was all just being directly sprayed onto the driver's side headers. Flyday's video of that, if you ever go find it, it's pretty. The fire was what, 15 feet high?
Yeah, we'll have
like
to we'll have to throw it in here because it's.
Yeah.
I'll
it's pretty
overlay
epic.
it.
It's pretty epic.
It was pretty bad. I didn't know I was on fire until I started the car again.
Well, and all of us are running up to him like, you know.
All that I saw from the driver's seat was, why did I lose front end traction? Which was clearly the oil going all the way across the car and under the front wheels. So I just turned the car over again and fire went everywhere.
So that's not even the best. So we get the line fixed and everything, get the car put back together, and then you do an open track night, like what, a week or two later?
Yeah, so I rushed isn't the right word because I didn't really rush.
No,
but I beat the concrete to make it out to a public day. So the public day was actually a learner's day followed by the OSW after or whatever at night.
Yeah.
So I lent my 350Z to Chris to drive for the learner's day because I really want to get him in a drift car and start drifting with us. With some old burner tires of his own. Like, go have fun, I'll meet you there afterwards with my stuff. Came out to the public day to just, bring the car up to temperature, run the car, make sure everything is fine. Because as far as I was concerned in the garage getting everything fixed, the motor wasn't making any knocking, any ticking, oil pressure was good. Like, it wasn't, other than, smoke from the water on the header wraps and the oil on the wraps and stuff like that, like nothing was going wrong.
Yeah.
Until
it went wrong.
Until the first lap was complete.
So we windowed the block and.
So I'll keep it short. Did the first lap, came in to check everything. Car wouldn't turn over. Worked on the car the whole night, and then went out again at the very end. And as soon as I left the line, before I even shifted into second, so I wasn't even at red line, I was at 5,000 plus. Windowed the block on both sides. I am the one that got that event, canceled or turned closed early by 30 minutes.
Nice work.
Yeah.
So
that's why I haven't showed up to another public event.
So in postmortem, tear the block down with our other friend Keegan, who's not here, but he's kind of a unsung hero in a lot of cases because he helps us quite a bit with both our cars, frankly. But we figure out that
he's our LS mentor.
Yeah, good. I like that. LS, yeah. So find out bearings trashed, likely from the oil line coming off, but it wasn't as obvious. I don't think it completely spun it yet, and then it just completely failed.
Yeah. So the weird part about it is we completely disintegrated an entire piston.
Oh yeah.
Like the biggest piece that was left was the size of my thumbnail. So as far as cause was really hard to figure out, other than the trashed bearings. That maybe I did spin it and it was just wasn't knocking until it was just going to call it quits.
Yeah. So that brings us back to the 4-point crate. So just to cap, so we're closer to this 2023 season, and then it becomes we have a plan, we have a budget, this is what it is. We have the backup motor, which is the 4.8 at this point. Okay, guess we're bringing it back and running the 4.8 next year. So yeah, in back goes the 4.8 with all
3
your
months.
pedal resolution.
Yes, so that happened in February, and the first round was
April, I think, right, or May?
I think it was May.
Yeah, right around.
So
there.
I had 3 months to swap everything back over.
Yeah.
And now that the car's been drenched in oil again, and to make sure that there was no other root causes, we had the injectors cleaned and tested. I did ohm readings on every single wire and sensor. So I knew that not only did I need to put the 4.8 back in, but I also needed not just a public event to go test. I wanted to really test the car to make sure that everything was just going to kind of go back to the way it was. So a month before the first round, I jumped into a Saturday private day and organized my own Sunday private day.
Oh, that's right, because I drove the Sunday.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I drove Saturday with a couple other Pro-Am guys that were just testing out their cars with, a group of, fun drivers, whatever. And then I drove our private day the following day to work on my tandem and drive with the crew. And if it was going to survive that weekend, then I was confident I would be okay in Pro-Am.
Yeah, and it did with flying colors. I mean, as much as we laugh and joke about that 4.8, that 4.8's been
a hero.
Workhorse. Yeah.
Yeah, the only problem I had was after my first lap, I had to wait for all the oil and water to burn itself off of the header wraps. Because, not going to lie, I ran after I saw the smoke. I was jumping out of that car with a fire extinguisher, ripping the hood off. I was like, I'm on fire again! But no, that was the only problem I had that entire week.
You're not on fire, Ricky Bobby. So that takes us into, okay, so we go to the first round. So at this point, it's still just John and I. And we kind of did that by design at first to kind of keep it simple, right? Like, we're probably the most, definitely, between the two of us, we know every nut and bolt in that car.
Yes. So
it just kind of made sense to kind of like show up kind of low key, do our thing, get data, figure things out a little bit, and just, and we actually got a pretty solid like rhythm going that day. It was pretty cool and learned a lot. But
yeah, there was some over planning and over personnel that happened on our first event in August for the other year, and just people in the way when you're going into the trailer, people hanging out where they shouldn't be, pit etiquette and stuff like that. And we just wanted to take a big step backwards and just KISS method, keep it simple.
Yeah.
And we're just you and me for the first round. I don't care how hot it is and how slow we are or how exhausted we get, just you and me, let's just keep it simple.
Yeah, so we stripped everything down to the basics, and then took a lot of notes, figured something out. So first round, we show up, not knowing how we're going to do. I guess, talk about practice a little bit. I mean, and we had an idea of like some of our consumables, tires and fuel and nitrous, but this was really the first like event we were going to actually, get some depth into, hopefully, and get some better, start collecting some better data on some of those things, track setup, driver, and we're also working on our communication too.
Right, we have not established any, because we didn't go anywhere the first time.
Right.
So this is the first time where, and because of the rain too, there was no, we turned 2 laps and then it rained. Yeah. And then we went to qualifying in the rain and I didn't qualify. So this is the first time weather's looking good. We're going to get to turn laps. We can actually work on stuff, both communication, driving, car, all the list of things that we didn't get to work on the year prior. And
I don't think people realize too that like spotter driver relationship, it's kind of a dance, right? Like we have to be on the same page. If I describe something over the radio, you have to know what the heck I'm talking about.
Right. It's a perfect example of that dance is that first round. You were telling me that I was looking great in outer zone 1. Oh yeah. When I was 5 feet from the zone. And that's because of just the vantage point.
Right.
And whatnot. And also round 1, 2, my box of how big the car was to me, arguably now after round 4, was twice the size of what I feel the car size is now. So knowing really where I was on course was something that we had to communicate a lot to get me to where I am now.
I think that was part of our baby steps, right? Instead of getting into like little nuances of driving and getting on the line, it's how far off this rear zone am I, off this line. You kind of like start with some of the simpler stuff like that.
Try to get 80% of the solution.
Yeah.
Before we start getting into the, hey, if you check up just a little bit here, you'll get that last 6 inches.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just get in the box first, right? Like, well, let's get in the box and get you aware that you're 3 foot off the actual back line.
Yes, exactly.
And I mean, definitely, I've noticed, like, kind of going back to you as a driver, I've noticed that now that you guys have that communication, like, good and, like, solid, you, just as a driver, impress me so much in the way that he can give you a note and you go out and do it exactly the next lap. Like, every time. Like, he's like, oh, if you like pull a little handbrake here or like check up here, and then you go out and the next run is exactly what he said, and it's like whatever correction that would have made, it makes that correction, and you're able to just like pick it up immediately. And like that's the most impressive thing for me as far as like your driving style too, and that helps with the communication that you guys have made.
I would mostly say that you're combining two different perspectives. Most of the time, like we say instruction, but Rich won't tell me, hey, pull handbrake here. He'll say, hey, your line is shallow when you're leaving this part of the course. You need to get deeper here. And I will come back over the radio and go, I can get deeper there by doing this or this. What are other drivers doing, or what do you think will be better? And basically we'll make a decision, whether it's Rich makes a decision or I make a decision of which one I want to go with first, or which one's more optimal, and then just go execute it next lap.
Yeah, it's more like the note of I was noticing in like round 4 the most of like where you had to slow down in the outer zone, which we'll get into, but where you had to slow down in the outer zone, and like he was giving you a note of like where you were on the track, and like the very next lap like you were perfect.
Yeah, the comparison of notes between round 1 and round 4 are drastically different.
Yeah.
Both in improvement of what we can improve on, and both how we were communicating. Because before, round 1 was, hey man, you're like 5 feet from that box.
Yeah.
Get out there somehow.
That touch and go you think you're like, you're like all in there and like sick with, you're like 8 feet away.
Yes.
Yeah, just that car awareness and all that stuff. Just
your outer zone 3, you're not touching until you exit the course.
Yeah, at least for the advantage I could see, exactly. So round 1, what I don't remember exactly what was the issue. So we didn't qualify first time out. We went to the quote unquote not so great 8. What do you remember? Why was that?
So we can pinpoint. I don't like to blame other people, but the reason that I made it into the knockout qualifying the first round was I was one of the first 3 drivers on track, and they completely changed the line of outer zone 3, and I was not at a driver skill level yet where I could adapt on the fly. And basically when I hit the touch and go and transitioned the car, I went, that's not where the line is supposed to go.
Yeah,
that's not where the tires are going. And I just transitioned and drove where the car was going all practice.
That's right. They brought it in like 5 feet.
They brought it in a whole car length.
Yeah.
I took a screen grab, and sent it to the judges and Chris Jackson afterwards, and they all realized that they have to watch the track guys do the track work.
Yeah, it's an honest mistake, but yeah, like you said, that you have that seat time to like adapt, that quickly on the fly. Or you're still, the blinders are just kind of still on, so to speak. When you talk about driving, right? Your blinders haven't really come off yet, so you're real honed in on it. The thing that's happening right now, not 2 steps ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
It was more, I can go out there and do what I did the last lap, even if it was a crap run, like a 30 score line or whatever, 30 score or whatever you want to call it. But I could go out there and do that, but I couldn't adapt unless I was purposely going out there to make a change at a certain point in the course. So to adapt on the fly without knowing that I had to adapt, I couldn't do yet.
So you're able to. So at that point, it's a survival. Right? We just want to make the show. We put together a qualifying run. Just get through the course. Don't.
Yeah. So to preface all the future, not so great second qualifying runs, because the driver field is not made out of 32 drivers, I made the decision that I don't care what the score is. It doesn't matter. I'm already going to be in the bottom of the bracket. I'm already going to be placed up against whoever I get placed up against. So it doesn't matter if I score a 70 or, as I did, at like a 30 or a 23.
It's calculated.
It felt dirty to do because you're going out there and driving the middle of the course and not looking like a driver trying to go, professional or, be competitive. But at the same time, it was a very calculated decision to just not care, drive through the middle of the course, complete the course, and get a score.
Yeah, don't lose drift. Don't spin out.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's the name of the game there. So we get in, and we have a top 32 battle in that case.
Yes, we have always had a top 32 battle until the final round. So this round we have top 32 battle against Tyler Hess. Yes.
I believe so.
Yeah, red C5 Corvette with a big cam.
Good dude. Yeah.
Yeah, nice guy. He ended up selling the car after the event. Didn't compete the rest of the season, but nice guy. And I won on a technicality.
Yeah. So essentially, what happened is, so another thing about Pro-Am is, so back years ago when I was more involved, you know, judges weren't really looking at lead cars or lead runs in terms of tandem battles to reflect on how the chase driver's doing. Like that wasn't as prevalent as it is now.
In the last 5 years?
Yeah, in the last few years. Well, FD's really, you know, done a great job of kind of setting the example, in my opinion. And I'm not just, you know, just saying, you know, trying to praise FD. I mean, I legitimately think they've done an excellent job as far as that goes. And I saw it trickle into Pro-Am judging this year, which was a massive relief to me, personally, because years ago, whoever had the better chase run, regardless of how good or bad the lead run is, without being like obscenely bad, you know, that's who won basically. So Hess ends up double initiating essentially on the entry, which really, you know, really puts John on kind of a poor line since he thinks that Hess is going to end up not initiating, so he kind of dials it back and then has to throw it in again too. And you don't have the resolution or horsepower to kind of make up for lost ground at that point, right? So the whole run ends up being like, you ended up pulling it in and making it work, but it wasn't the prettiest. But you were really kind of thrown off from the start. And I, you know.
At the same time too, my tandem at this level of power and speed wasn't really there yet.
Yeah, that's right.
And even though I was thrown off in the beginning, you know, I really only had about another 5% worth of skill in the tank to close the tandem gap. So where I ended up was about as good as I was going to do in the tandem anyways, regardless of what happened from the double initiation and all the stuff that happened in the first outer zone.
Yeah. So we end up winning that battle, which is exciting, right? This is our, I would say this is like kind of a reset, but this is our first real round where we were like, no, like we want to come in and compete, right? Like
yes.
And I say, this is something else I want to point out too, right? Every round we go to, like we want to win. That's never not the goal, is to win, right? But there's micro goals in between, which is like qualify, in our case at least.
Yes.
You know, get into the top 16. You know, make it the top 16. And then kind of anything after that, even though we want to beat everyone else and win, is kind of bonus territory, right? We're doing better than we, you know, really realistically thought we had the setup to do. So we get in the top 16 first round, which was exciting for us, even though it's technicality.
It was still exciting because when I got the call, because I didn't really know what was happening. Honestly, I didn't know about the double initiation. I didn't have the vision dialed in yet where, like, I just saw him initiated behind him, and then he kind of straightened. Never crossed my mind about double initiation or this and that. So I had no idea what was going to happen with that battle.
And I'm calling you over radio saying, hey, that entry really messed you up. And at this point, I don't have any like context for how the judges are going to judge yet. It's the first round. So I'm like, man, I really hope they take the lead into account here, because I think if you do that, we win this battle. And they did.
Speaking of micro goals, not necessarily our goal, but one of the things that we didn't really want to do in our first year was protest.
Yeah, good point.
Like, I understand, like in this case, if he got the win, which he did double initiate, I totally understand protesting. But we really wanted to have our first year be wins on technicalities or on true merit.
But
like
straight from the judges.
Yes,
yeah.
Straight from the judges.
Yeah.
Correct. But yeah, I was excited. As soon as they dropped the hand my way, I yelled over the radio to Rich, "I'm so excited! Let's go lose to Taylor Ray!"
Okay, so yeah, so we already knew if we won this, right? Because Taylor Ray, qualified pretty high. He got a bye run in 16. I guess by virtue of not getting to the not straight 8, but so we knew we were going to go against the winner of us was going against Taylor Ray, which was exciting. Like just to
Do it.
regardless that we're underpowered, like we want to drive with the best people.
I don't get to drive with them.
In the best cars and everything, right? Like that's still a win for us.
That's the only place I get to do this at.
Yeah.
I don't get to go to the public days or their test days and drive with them. This is the only place that I get the opportunity to drive with them.
And we can see, their line, how they measure up against us. I mean, we can kind of see like, okay, like how far do we need to go to be competitive with them? Like this kind of gives us where that delta, that gap is.
Yeah.
So we go against Taylor Ray and his like 3x horsepower. I know he wasn't running that much horsepower.
No, he was probably running mid 800.
Yeah, so
but he was still
double.
running a 315 grippier tire.
Yeah.
And compared to my 265 that we had aired up.
Well, and let's real quick too. Our philosophy for this level is we're gonna build the car around a pro spec tire.
Correct.
Like, to us, there's no point, and whatever your choice is, right? If you're running a 315, that's your choice. That's fine. But our personal philosophy is we're not going to build a car around a bigger tire and handicap ourselves when we get to pro spec. Like that's
right. I believe there's two philosophies around what you're doing in ProAm. If you're there at ProAm to have fun and to win, and you're not going to go to the next step, then by all means throw a 315 on there and go, go seal kicking. But if you are there to go to the next level, then technically, which we're not going to quite do, but technically, I should be out there on 255 GT radials and building the car around that tire because that's what the tire they run at the next step. No ifs, ands, or buts. That's what I should be driving. So I'm not running a bigger tire than a 265 Accelera or Kenda right now based around that philosophy, and it's more based on cost that I'm not buying a GT radial.
Yeah, so that's our so as I said, to back up a little bit, that's our philosophy going into it. So yeah, we go against Taylor, he absolutely destroys us, but it was still a blast to compete against him.
No, and he unlocked the next level because that was the hardest and fastest and most committed that I drove that track all weekend.
Yeah.
Because all I was trying to do was keep up with him, and I was like, oh, I can drive the car like this.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. Yeah, exactly.
So even though it was, yes, as people were like, Taylor's out there, seal kicking and seal clubbing and stuff, but it actually was a great benefit to me because it helped me progress.
Yeah. So we get knocked out, but like I said, the whole weekend, well, and also we ended up with a really good flow. I would go to the side of the track, spot, you'd come off, I'd, hop in the golf cart, run back, and we just had to change tires, change bottle, fuel. We just had this rhythm that whole day.
Yeah, I would do tires, you would do fuel, and then depending on who finished first, would start working on the nitrous bottle, and then whoever finished second would start putting new ice in the cool suit.
We also figured out how much nitrous we were going through. I'm still in shock at how many bottles we have to take with us to an event.
So round one was that course layout was the most nitrous consumption out of any of the rounds. In 5 laps, if we did 5 laps, which we really weren't, but if we did 5 laps
Due to tire wear,
due to tire wear, we would go through over 7 pounds of nitrous on that course layout.
Which means we were at risk. So even with a 10-pound bottle, because of the way nitrous works and things are, being that low on a bottle with that setup puts us at risk of running out of nitrous, by the way, mid-run.
Yes, so those 5 laps, lap number 5 was not usable because tire was just starting to get Accelera versus Kenda, we were on Acceleras that round. Right before they lose their last 20-15% of tire life, they just become ice. So basically halfway through the run, the tires would get to that point, they'd become super loose. And also the nitrous, you could hear the car, also see on the air fuel that it was rich, and also see that it just didn't have as much grunt as it had before. So 4 usable laps, 5 would be over 7 pounds.
So we got good consumption data, we got good rhythm in us. We were figuring out the communication style, and then I think the last component was when we set the car up, we kind of an idea of the grip level and with the test day where we were at, but again, different environment, right? And we kind of figured out we were pretty close to the line of grip that the car could handle, and that you were, as a driver, really like capable to use at that point.
Right. Even if we put John today or Temple today in the car for a first round now, I actually wouldn't run as much grip as we did because it wouldn't allow the car to hit certain parts of the track. So we found the limit of grip that the car could take with the package we had.
Yeah, and pretty quickly. We actually zeroed in on that pretty fast, which was, I think, part of our success story was the car, and we'll get into this in other rounds, but we really figured out, okay, the car is really where it needs to be. It's on the line. Now, as a driver, you need to figure out how to utilize a car like that and then be ready to surpass it, by the end of the season. That's
we can add on top of that and say that other than tire pressure, we did not change the alignment, the toe gain, and the dampening of that car after the first round.
Yeah.
All we changed was tire pressure for the rest of the season.
I will say, other than OSW though, the track conditions were pretty. I mean, there was some like more technical, a little more flowy like differences, but as far as like pavement and general track conditions, all being a Sebring, they were mostly the same. OSW was like the biggest, I think, like variance from that. But that helped us. That helped us a little bit, yeah. So we when we in our season planning, right? We said, okay, we're gonna run this round, a lot of this tires and so forth. Then we had a gap between round 1 and 2. Knowing that OSW was going to be round 3, we immediately and that we had a 2-month, a 2-month break between the rounds as our longest gap. We planned a test day in between for OSW to get data on running the OSW layout, like for that exact purpose.
Right. So we tested OSW early because it allowed us to stay within a budget of driving this car with those tires once a month. Basically from May or April until now, we drove the car once a month, whether it was at competition or practice. And we mean practice, not just going around on the skid pad and making sure the car works.
Yeah, it was a deliberate test day.
Practice event, essentially.
Yeah, where we set up goals and had very strategic, tangible goals set out for each of them. So we collected data on OSW and we figure out the run-up is going to be a challenge.
Yes. So OSW had the very basic goal was to actually learn how to do it.
And Kevin Lawrence actually came out and helped tremendously.
Yes, thanks to you.
Yeah. No, but I mean, thanks to him. I mean, he was able to come out and, my experience level, I definitely don't have as much experience as he does. So it was amazing for him to come and give some feedback to you for on how to execute and do some of those things, initiation.
It was, I need to learn how to do it. And also, how do I even know how high up on the wall I am? Remember, I'm only after round 1. I still think the car is twice as big as it really is. So this practice really solidified how shitty that T56 transmission really is.
It's real notchy.
It's very notchy and will only shift as fast as it wants to shift.
Yeah, there's definitely a limit, and you can easily hit it. It's not gonna.
I think that the power that the car made wasn't a problem in doing what the course allowed. It just meant how much slower I was going to be compared to the competition. But after that test day, we knew on the list of things to figure out for next year, what are we going to do about the transmission?
So we figured that out. Kevin Lawrence is a huge help. So you mentioned about like knowing where the wall is. I know from spotting for Kevin and FD, like his method of figuring out where the wall is to hit it, not wreck the car, but like a little bump and be like, oh, all right, we're there, lock it in. Yeah.
And my only experience of a wall was driving it on the sim, where as soon as you touch it, it throws you into the wall.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was very worried and nervous about learning the limits of where to put the car by learning on the bank at OSW, because if I crashed the car, all my budget was into stuff for next year, not to fix the car now to continue the season, because I already blew up the 6.2. So, but that fear got overcame by actually running the wall and
Scraping the bumper off.
yes.
Yeah. So figured out a run up that would work with the 408 stock gearing that was in the car at the time.
Right.
But also, so that told us a couple things. The transmission was going to be a problem, a challenge, and that we decided to try and fix the gearing issue. Like, yeah, we have a spare depth.
We thought about it. We took a month and thought about it. We did a bunch of spreadsheets with wheel calculation, wheel speeds, what other people have done and what their gearing was and what speed they were running, and it didn't become let's do this until 3.5 weeks until the actual round.
Until we have 4 OSW, right? Yeah.
Because, like I said, budget for this year was toast. It was all going into stuff for next year. I wasn't willing to spend $1,500 on a 430, a different diff, because I'd rather save that money for maybe I can buy a dog box transmission or something, or I can buy more tires, or who knows. I'll just survive the round with the stock 4.08 gear ratio.
So the other kind of thing that developed between that test day and round 2 was I decided I was gonna build my own personal program for 2024. So that kind of changed our thought process for, well, we're still a team, right? Even though we both are going to have our own programs next year, I'll do a partial season, but, even for me to be a better spotter for ProSpec or whatever, for you at this point, and having had that experience with like Nate and Kevin, is I need competition seat time myself. That is like the big deficit for me. Is like I can put you on the right line all day long. I can tell you how to get there, give you suggestions. We can figure that out all day. But in terms of like tandem battle and some of the little nuances of how to get the car the right way in anticipation of the lead car, that's for sure like my biggest deficit. So I decided that, and then we were like, okay, well, like, what are we gonna do for crew? Now there's 2 of us. I can't spot for you, and we don't have any crew now. Like, what's the plan? So, like, I think for both of us, immediately 2 people came to mind, and they're sitting at this table.
Yes.
Like there's like no question immediately. Hey, like, if they'll say yes, like this could work. Like we could make a pretty solid team here. So. Right.
So, if we're both at a round competing, which is going to happen next year,
at least twice, yeah.
At this time, this was let's war game this thought process. Right. It was all right, we both need our own spotter or to share a spotter. And, I said on my side of the field, I was like, I'm okay with me and my spotter doing the 2-man dealio. Even if we break something and I got to fix it, as long as my spotter's there to help grab some tools or whatnot. It was like my biggest deficit was I need a spotter for when Rich is driving. Whereas on your side, it was a little bit different.
Yeah.
I
needed crew. I need someone to help. So my wife Candace, she's very competitive, and she can be real critical in a good way.
Real?
Yeah.
You mean extremely?
Yeah. So like we'll watch drifting together, and she'll be like, I don't care if they're down 400 horsepower. They should be on their door. Like she is like no excuses, play to win every run, which is you want that in somebody. So that part was pretty covered for me, other than babysitting. That, so it was crew. So, and Frank and I go back 10 years almost now.
It is actually
next year will be 10 years.
Yeah, next year will be 10 years.
Yeah, we huddled under the
at OSW.
At OSW we huddled under the shed there out of the rain one fun event, and
then realized that we had both been in drifting for about the same amount of years, and we're both from I wasn't originally from South Florida, but you were in South Florida drifting, and then we had both ended up in Orlando, so it just kind of went from there.
Yeah. So anyway, it was like, well, okay, do we bring them on this season and kind of like get them some experience, and it kind of worked great.
So the way that I kind of pitched it to my buddy Chris over here was, hey man, you know racing enough. You do autocross. You understand by going to actual tracks like Homestead and Sebring and Daytona. Like, you understand racing terminology, and you come and hang with us to go do to watch FD every once in a while. You know, not only do I want to convert him, that's why I gave him the 350Z to go do Learner's Day, but I felt that as long as he had enough interest in coming along and doing this, that he could learn and pick up on the differences of drifting and the nuances of it as long as he was exposed to it. So it turned into, hey, let's make this a crew training year. So Frank gets the understanding of rhythm and what's expected of him and you know what happens on my car, so that when he does it for Rich, he can do that. And then Chris can literally shadow Rich the rest of the rounds, fill in where needed, which, you know, ended up being pretty big, you know, once we kind of figured out what we were not really doing a good job at. But really just ask questions and see how Rich was communicating and guiding me and understanding what's happening in drifting versus road racing.
Yeah, and it didn't have to be like a hard sell for me, because
I was making it a hard sell.
No, to be perfectly honest, I had zero interest in drifting. Okay, like, you know, I did autocross, right? I got a regional championship when I came over here, but, you know, the speeds and the risk that's involved, it's a lot more tame. The builds I was running, you know, are a lot more tame. So, you know, I wasn't, you know, seeing this whole sport, you know, I didn't have any interest at all. But, you know, there was two things that really attracted me to it. Was, you know, right, it was a good opportunity to learn from Rich, right? He's got a great experience, pedigree in the sport. And the other thing too was, you know, you coming to me, right? Like, you guys already talked about it with, you know, building, you know, Taylor Hall's car. Like, I saw that whole evolution, right? I've known you for maybe like 12 to 15 years, and right, and seeing
before we both knew that we were both in two cars. Yeah,
you know, and seeing that progress, you know, the time you're putting into doing this, you know, and we share, right, like with the 6.2, we shared this this experience of windowing our own engines. So so, you know, like, to be a part of that, you know, to support that, you know, journey and those goals, and more importantly, knowing that, you know, I believe in that, right? I'm not just out here wasting my time in something that I didn't really have any interest in. But, you know, that's obviously changed, and there's a lot of things that I've learned kind of coming into this sport and not having that background, or seeing how it's kind of evolved throughout that time.
So to pick up on the pace of where we're going here, so round 2, we were planning to come out with this full crew right here.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know, like, on my end, like, I've been in motorsports almost my whole life. You know, I grew up like kind of a track hooligan, and it just, like, drifting has been like my through line throughout. So it was even easier sell for me, because I love drifting. And, you know, I was excited to come on for the end of this season, because, you know, knowing how to work on cars and being a mechanic for so long and knowing drifting and everything else, even still, it does take learning, because every driver does things differently. Every team gels differently, and, you know, the specific things of, you know, what your car needs and what the team needs and everything else. So being there for a whole season for a learning experience before just jumping in on a season where we're going to actually compete was definitely good. And I'm super excited for the opportunity. It's gonna be real fun next year with 2 cars. So
well, and you got to put your hands on every tool and every piece of equipment that's in my trailer, that's basically going to be used for both cars if
exactly.
both cars are out there,
and where everything is, and how, you know, the even just the little nuances to, you know, when you open the door of the trailer, you have to hold the door when it's windy. Like,
So we go into round 2, and different layout, backwards layout and a little different from when we did round 1 at Sebring.
Yes, so this was a new layout that they tested in their fun day in July that we did not attend because we were testing at OSW.
Right.
We chose testing at OSW over running turn 15 a month early, or turn 17 backwards a month early.
Yeah, and not a decision without like some legitimate like consideration. We went back and forth about that for a little bit, but yeah.
There was more learning to be had at OSW than by going out and running their fun event with the backwards layout turn 17.
Yeah, we figured there was more unknowns with that, and I think we were right. Frankly,
I think we were absolutely correct.
Yeah, it was, good call on us, I guess. So yeah, we get out there, and it felt organic, like having you guys out. Obviously, like I have the most, most of it like you guys, at the track specifically, but.
Yeah.
But so the unknown for me as far as like how people operated was really crisp, but like it was just kind of organic. I mean, like obviously as a friend, like I kind of know you, and you've helped me in my own garage with stuff, and but yeah, just the whole thing like felt organic. It just kind of clicked, like, and it wasn't even the exact roles weren't obvious like right away, because that kind of I think developed over that second round, especially with like data collection and feedback and the rhythm of turning the car around between stuff, but yeah, it just kind of worked.
That event was also the only full weekend event.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Oh, that was
Good call.
So it made it even easier for us to figure things out because the pace of the event was much slower.
I totally forgot. So
Yeah.
we also rented a house, so there's like that kind of like we have a whole bonding of like being together the whole weekend, and it's just a little different. So yeah, I completely forgot about that part. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, maybe not that Airbnb again.
Yeah, it was a little.
not that one. No, yeah. That was,
But
My bad, guys. My bad.
it's
Yeah,
okay. We tried.
I really thought we were gonna get serial killed.
Yeah.
But no, it was super organic. Like I honestly thought that Chris had been the whole season with you guys. like Chris showed up, so I was like, okay, like let me find my role. And like I said, we've been friends for almost 10 years. We pitted together in fun events for the whole time. So like, it seemed super organic to find slide my position in, and I was like, oh, Chris has been here the whole time, so I'm like, find my position, and then it just kind of all fit.
Yeah, like find your place, and it just
Yeah.
clicked. So we get through that. So that run ended up being interesting. So there's some technical part of the track. I think, getting through that was a little bit of like figuring out how to drive with your eyes a little bit, because it was a little deceiving.
I would call this the aftershock of really, like, I put the car on, remember, the month before, I put the car on the wall at OSW.
Oh, yeah.
I finally learned how small the car wheel was, but it wasn't ingrained in me yet. So this was the first time that I knew how small the car was and trying to actually put it where I'm supposed to. So there was it was a very slow learning curve for me to learn that track, because there was some parts like outer 2 where you transition the car really late and really committed, and I was like, well, I know how small my car is now, and I know how deep I'm supposed to be there. If I screw this up, there's a wall.
I was going to say, you're going at a wall.
I was very scared of it. So it wasn't instilled in me yet how big, like the size of the car.
I think too, we figured out pretty quickly also that the last turn, which was kind of like around a real slow speed peninsula, was a danger zone for us, because if your car gets out of nitrous, it is real difficult in drift in that scenario to get the nitrous to kick back in and to light the tires back off. Like
Right.
near impossible.
We had the car as loose as we felt we could go without, just getting dusted by these Corvettes out there.
Yeah.
We could have made it looser, but then on outer 1 and outer 2, I'd be sitting on limiter. So it was a compromise of, we want enough grip to be on the nitrous limiter, as I call it, where the RPMs go to 6,500, and then instead of making it to 68 at red line and the nitrous turns off, it kind of just falls back into the nitrous window and the nitrous kicks back on. So that's where we kind of put the car at. And the course layout, I liked the course layout. I thought it was a good test of our skills, and it had technical aspects and commitment aspects to it. But the hairpin for the Interclip 2 was If you didn't have the right equipment, you were on risky business, because remember, and I'm going to bring up another name in here. Me and Sasha are both running F-Body T56 transmissions, both running V8s with nitrous, and we both approached that same problem with two different solutions, of both which had their own risks.
Yeah.
I approached it with stay in third gear, hope you're going fast enough for the nitrous to kick in, and you'll be okay.
Yeah, you accepted the nitrous part of the risk of it, right?
Right. Whereas Sasha accepted the transmission part of the risk, where he was downshifting into second gear, and both of us failed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both of us failed.
Yeah, ultimately both were a problem.
Ironically enough, I know like in the beginning you were talking about like going to like a V8 swapped S chassis and like how we tell people not to do that and you like skip through. But ironically enough, running a 4.8 with a ton of nitrous has kind of given you the same aspect of like a real peaky car, where you have to like learn very intimately how to drive the car in very specific ways, because like drive around the engine.
That actually brings up a very good point. One thing that I started learning this round that I haven't really talked about is I started learning how to slip the clutch on the launch from the start line in order to be in the nitrous to not get left.
But not blow the tires off and do a pro stock burnout the whole way up
Correct.
to entry, right? Yeah, exactly.
Except at OSW, because that's the only way you can do
right,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Necessary there, but yeah.
Pretty
Yeah.
much every car has to just do like a 3-gear burnout to initiate an OSW.
Well, so you brought me one too. So shout out to Jackson and the US Drift team, because US Drift Circuit team, because I felt like every round, like the layouts had pretty different elements, like between like technical and flowy and the oval and different feels to it. Like no layout really felt like it was a repeat, frankly.
No, that was great.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
what was cool about it is, sure, you can kind of look at Sebring and go, well, you just drive on the skid pad of turn 17, but leaving from under the bridge or exiting by going under the bridge is totally different from entering and exiting the OSW skid pad.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and absolutely, like what you were saying, like it was good to see that the team put in, like the tracks were like very technical. Like there was definitely things that had to be figured out at like every round.
Yeah, they all had a technical element to it, which like it's like a double-edged sword, because it creates a little bit of difficulty, but that's also part of the challenge, right? Like that's part of the game, And I think it ultimately, adds to the feeling of success when you get it right, Yeah.
Also adds to the frustration
Yeah. Fair
when
point, yeah.
when there's nothing you can do about it and it
Yeah.
just bites you.
No, fair. So to get to that, we go to qualify on this time, first qualifying run.
Yes, so because it's a weekend, we actually qualified really late. And the qualifying went so long that even though I'm in the bottom of the points and go pretty soon, my first run was actually dark.
Yeah.
And then when I did my second run, it was pitch black.
And we as a team, right, we made a decision together. We were worried that the temperature change in the track, which we thought was going to be a factor, and ended up being no factor, unfortunately for us. We kind of set the car up a little different in terms of tire pressure to maybe accommodate for a grippier track.
So we still have questions, but we still learned.
Right.
Our questions are still, how much tire pressure are we supposed to adjust per track surface temperature?
Yeah.
What is that answer? We don't know. But as far as what the car is capable of, the weather we have in Florida, and, regardless of maybe it was 5 degrees that it dropped, like, we don't need to change anything. There's not enough change to make a difference, or we're not running enough heat or, stress through the tire to actually make a difference.
Yeah, we're not like far enough into the margin where
Yeah.
like just that slight change would affect it that much.
Yeah, and that was a lesson learned. So,
Yeah.
so you go to enter, you end up putting tires off because the track was not as grippy as we had anticipated. We put
I
some
thought
grip
I
on
had
it.
a banger run.
Yeah, no.
Um,
You're banging cones. That's
but,
what you're banging. Yeah.
But I was, 3 inches off?
Yeah, knocking cones off the track. Yeah.
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 So that's something I want to change for next year. This whole 2 tire off rule.
Or at least propose and try to
Yeah, because we got some changes at OSW, but not this last round. Either way, it's if we're going to be FD Pro-Am and we're going to run FD rules, I think that our tire off rules should be the same.
Yeah, there ended up being I'm not a huge fan of it. I get what there is an argument there when they say, well, if there was a wall there, right, then 2 tires off, you'd be smashing the car, and I get that. I think that's a fair point, but I'm still not a huge fan of the 2 tire thing. Three tires is so much more definitive, in my mind. You just get into this kind of gray zone sometimes, the 2 tire thing.
And I feel like we even talked about it like the season that FD did 2 tires off. They were having
like in 2018.
So
there were so many runs that just became boring, even though the guy was literally an inch off the line. And they're just like, just give him a little bit more of a deduction and give us a one more time.
Yeah, so many zeros on technicalities that year. It was painful to watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and it was a little bit like that in this season. There were some of those especially with qualifying, I would say.
Yeah. Yes.
It was kind of painful on some of the technical, qualifying zeros that would happen. And it's no excuse, right?
Like you're saying, at the same time, we got to work it within the judging, So
granted, that's what the judges wanted. That's what the judges stated in the drivers' meeting.
Yeah, and it was clear.
It was clear.
Yeah. So we got to work with what we got, but as a preference, yeah. So that happens. We get tires off on technicality. We're back in the same position of, just get points on the board at this point. Get points on, get in the game.
23.
Yeah, and just
I did not care. It actually took them so long to score me that they didn't score me until 3 runs later, because they didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Because I missed every single zone. I drove right in the middle of the course. And I stayed in drift, and they're just like, "What do we even score him?"
Yeah, and it's just one of those things. Just get points, get in. There's absolutely no value add at that point in trying to go for it, and it's pretty really conservative. So we get in, and we have another top 32 battle.
Yep, another Corvette. So now I've faced. This will be my 3rd Corvette.
That's right.
This time Brandon Cox in a C5, and now because this was a 2-day event, we got to do tandem practice.
Yeah.
So round 1, we only had a practice session or a long practice session, and then we did qualifying, and then we went right into battles, if you remember.
Oh yeah.
For round 2, we had the 2-day, so we had double practice, qual, and then on Sunday we got tandem practice and then competition. So this was the first time I was like, oh, get the focus on some tandem and actually try to not just figure out the course and drive the course, try to drive with other drivers. That was really valuable.
And I would say too, this is where I saw some first signs of, John's figuring tandem out a little bit. You showed some signs of, I could see little elements of greatness, sprinkled in there where I'm like, okay, I walked out of that event saying, John could probably make something happen here. I think he has what it takes. We just have to see time and keep moving. I kind of saw some elements of what I think everyone started to see at the end of the season, but
That round I took a completely different mental approach, and it's now evolved, but it's the same mental approach. Before, when I would tandem, I would take a very road coursey follow, and I would be mirroring the driver perfectly. I'd be exactly where they're putting the car, making all the same corrections they were. I was a mirror image of them 2.5 cars back. That's not good enough for drifting. So it was like, hey, stop treating your follow as a follow. And I tell myself to actively crash into the lead driver's door. And that's when things changed.
And I really saw your ability to mimic. Even again, you're 2.5 cars back. Your mimicry was you got the timing. You were anticipating and doing things when they were doing it just too far back. If we could just close that gap, like it's game over. Like we're gonna go deeper into these rounds and start doing better if we can.
In this round, I started closing that gap.
Yeah. So we ended up losing the Cox in that one.
Yep, lead run, fell out of nitrous window, zeroed.
Yeah.
Took myself out. That's all she wrote on that one. So that was out in the 32 on round 2.
So in between those rounds, we make the decision to get a 437 gear, which is where we landed on the optimal ratio for, what we wanted to do.
Right. There's two factors here that really pushed this decision, because we'd been talking about it for a whole month prior.
Right.
It was the car bogged in round 2. Man, if I had a 437 back there, maybe things would have been better.
Yeah, and give yourself a little more buffer with
that. And instead of buying a diff or whatever the solution was, because we didn't know it at the time, instead of buying it only for OSW, I was now buying it for potentially everything, for all of Sebring as well. Maybe not round 1, we don't know, but definitely would have loved to run that at round 2.
Right.
So that meant for at least half the season, round 2 and round 3, this diff would be
potentially game changer.
Potentially game changer and better.
Yeah.
And then you also figured out how to build and make these diffs at an affordable price.
Yeah.
That was a fun bit of research in the middle of the night.
I can't take all the credit. That was Frank and I going back and forth at like midnight, a couple nights, going, "Hey, let's do a part number."
I was like finding pictures of bearings and then zooming into the part number and then searching that part number and then what that part number went into. Like,
yeah, so I'm
very good at research.
so
First engineering.
Yeah, so and I had already for myself been learning all the how to rebuild a diff completely for because I'm for my own car. So it was kind of a natural. Okay, let's do that. But I would say so. The other thing that did help is you started sim driving, and Tiny in that group really helped you out with a big component of that.
Yes. So round 2, we also had a new announcer, right. Jonathan, goes by Instructor Tiny, and I found out he was a veteran, and one thing that Rich and I were kind of okay with in the beginning, with being low key and just starting out, like not really worried about the hype or the announcers or anything like that. But the progress that I made on round 2 was like, I can't be the nobody hiding anymore. So knowing that he was a vet and knowing that, we wanted them to actually talk about my car properly instead of the super monster V8 S14, I reached out to him on Instagram and found out that he is part of a sim drifting community called ACS. And they also do sim drift competitions as well. And he hooked me up with their guys that make custom cars for their sim competitions and was like, hey, here's my buddy's dyno graph, and basically built me, for those of you that do the sim drifting, a VDC competition S14, but with my dyno graph.
Yeah, based around your power curves.
Correct.
Exactly.
So they built me that car, and then I synced up with all the rest of them and started driving OSW with them every week, every Thursday night, leading up to OSW.
And a car that was close enough to your car that
yes.
you got some of the same like elements and feel that, maybe not exact, but close
the same
enough.
level of commitment that was required to not fall out of the power band.
Right. And also, for those that don't know, one of the reasons too is, so John's car has a lot of like veteran elements to it that are based around like your engineering unit, the engineer for combat, goes back to you being a
combat engineer.
The flag on the right side and
being reverse.
Right.
And then there's unit patches on the left, because you always wear your unit patch that you're assigned to on your left.
So I think that'll be more apparent with the theme next year. But yeah, just to kind of point that out too, a lot of the veteran stuff is, clearly like, important to you, but important to all, the whole team really. Like that's.
But just the fact that there's another veteran out there other than Steven with Veteran Trust that I could connect with.
Yeah.
And making that connection was important to me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So
Because I also learned after that round that Brandon Cox was a Marine.
yes,
I did not know that prior to either as well.
I'm still disappointed that you didn't throw crayons into his car during one of the
I
practices.
told him I was going to do that,
Yeah.
but I'm saving that for next year.
All right, well, so he knows it's coming now. But
He knows.
expect some crayons in your future. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been fragoed.
So, so you're doing sim stuff with Tiny. So shout out to him in that group. Like that was a huge help.
That was huge all the way for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and then changing the gearing gave you some buffer, going to OSW2. So then, for me personally, my wife had a family emergency, had to fly to town that weekend, and I wasn't able to physically be there, which like had my blood on fire the whole time watching on TV. But so I was able to be at that round. But you guys, like, you wouldn't have known that I wasn't there.
No.
Like these guys totally stepped up, we're already stepping up anyway, but just absolutely crushed it. So, and I knew, I had a feeling that with that gear and seeing you doing your test runs, like OSW could be your track. Like you could do real good there. I had a lot of faith in you, and I don't think you did at that time in yourself, but I was confident that this could be a real good round.
Yeah, no, that day started off with, as a military term I like to use, embrace the suck. That day was just about bracing the suck, getting through it, and just doing what the car can do, and accepting whatever result that was, because it's not enough car to be competitive at OSW. So, do we start going into what happened?
Yeah. So I'm Mr. Positivity. I'm like, you do great. So first lap, how'd it go?
I caught on fire again.
Again. What kind of fire, John?
Another oil fire?
Oh. So let me back up to the day before. We're having lunch the day before, and he's like, yeah, I changed the oil, and my oil plug stripped out. I'm like, what do you mean? It's okay. He's like, yeah, well, I threw it in, and it kind of tightened up. And I was like, well, just keep in mind that, crankcase pressure is still a thing. Like, it's not just about it holding itself in, that there could be a little pressure pushing back on it. Just, maybe check it like after the first run or two, and it checked itself.
Yes.
Out.
And from a video I got from one of the video guys much later after the event, I was technically on fire before I even left the bank.
So metal.
And not in the right way.
And not. It was a fire run. It was actually.
It was so
pretty
great.
good run.
Like I had showed up and I was in the stands watching, and I saw that run, and I was like, this run is great. It's going to be a good day. We can clean that up a little bit. And then I heard fire, and I was like, I sure hope that's not John.
Yeah. So car catch. So that's not the only thing that happened. At the end of the run, you felt something too.
Yes, so as I left the very end of Outer 2, there was a very loud whine and clunking, and I wasn't sure if it was transmission or
the rear end
or the diff. I pretty much was like, it's got to be the diff we just built.
Yeah, so you get back into the pit. So I get a phone call.
Yes.
Which is fine, and about everything, about the fire and everything. So they're checking out the fire stuff. I was talking to Chris at the time.
Chris was the perfect man
for
all the communication and questions.
No, and Chris understood the assignment that day.
Yeah,
well, I think everyone
absolutely.
did. So
I knew what the problem was before. Before he even hit it, I'm like, okay.
So when I heard what happened, I'm like, oh, I'm pretty sure it's the diff. And when I had built the diff, I didn't mean to. I over torqued the pinion nut and then backed it back out and tried to retorque it. And so I immediately suspected that to be the problem. That as soon as the car got to speed, it reseated itself, and the pinion nut wasn't where it needed to be to get the pressure on it. So Frank's already starting to remove the diff.
Well, I hadn't started to remove the diff yet. I had the drive shaft out, and as soon as I had the drive shaft out, I was like, the pinion's loose. I was telling Chris was telling you, and you were like, try to tighten the pinion up.
Yeah, I was like, just I'm pretty sure this is it. Check it.
So half hearing the specs on the phone, you're like, don't use an impact. So I was like,
No, I said give it like set it down like one and give it like one little go.
all I heard was like tighten it up loosely, like don't use an impact, and I went, Chris, give me the impact.
And that impact I have at the track is an old impact. It doesn't have settings.
It had no
only
settings.
has full
That's right.
full dug.
I was real gentle. It was a gentle dugga, but I hit it about twice, and then I felt it, and I was like, that feels like a 240 diff.
Yeah.
And then you said it's good.
Yeah.
And then John was like, I'm worried about the diff, and I was like, 100%, we're good.
I was
And
like
then
95%. I'm pretty sure this is it. We're good.
I looked at Chris and Dana, I'm like 50-50. I'm like, don't tell John, 50-50.
Yeah. So yeah, I was still legitimately like 95%. I'm like I'm almost being the one who built the thing. I'm like I'm almost sure this is it. So
Yeah. And the timing kind of worked out because at that time I had finished running around the entire pits and trying every solution I could on track to fix my stripped drain plug
Oh, yeah.
that was no longer existing and threads no longer existing that turned into, hey Chris, you need to go.
Well, I was like I knew the whole size, so I was like, hey, we're gonna put this size MPT, and I've got the tap, I have everything. I had everything here to do it. I just wasn't there. So Chris calls me on the way, and I'm like, he's like, well, I'm gonna try and stop at a place, close. So I was like, okay.
Executive on feet
No.
decision making.
Oh,
right
yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
I saw I was just like, man, Rich is like too far from here, and then like
It would have been what 2
I
hours
think Keegan was
almost.
gonna run something over your place too, and I was just like, we just don't have the luxury of this time. So while I'm here, just call up a couple places nearby, see if they have it, see if they can put it off to the side, and then hopefully we can spin this back around in time.
And I'm about to load the kids in the truck too, and just like get to them wherever I get to them along the way. So I was like, okay, well, here's what you need: this size tap, this size plug, this size drill bit, and you're good. And then I think you called me and were like, will this work? And it's close enough. And yeah, so we found it within 10 minutes of the track. That was absolutely critical.
And the timing was the timing. Even though the day is full of shit, the timing of the day just kept falling right on the mark because by the time that Frank and I got the fire retardant all off the car, cleaned up, pushed back in the pits, back up on jack stands, we were taking apart the front passenger suspension in order to get a drill to drill the pan as Chris rolled up.
We're really good at getting fire retardant off of the car, by the way. Yeah. We're like real good
it's
at it.
fantastic. Water hose, you just got to push the car to the water
And do it
hose.
really early. Like don't wait. You have to do it
Yeah,
immediately.
absolutely.
We're good at getting the fire retardant off the car within the first hour.
Yeah.
That it's been
Slide
applied.
United's tips for having a car that caught on fire. Get the fire stuff off immediately.
Well, I was worried about it because of the year where it was Forsberg, where they pulled his pin.
I remember.
And it took them like the rest of the day to get that car started. Like he was out, but it took him the rest of the day before that car could even start. So as soon as I saw him like dump the fire retardant, I was like, oh no.
I think I told you over the phone. I was like, "Hey, there's a hose over at the bathroom there." Like, well, I only knew that, by the way, because that's what we did the first time they caught on fire.
That's
So,
exactly what we did.
It wasn't my novel idea or anything. I just I'd been there before with John. So
Yeah.
So anyway, we got that cleaned up, and I think you got back out for qualifying. Like your next run was qualifying, I think.
I did. We had the car done and ready with enough time before to drive around the pits to check if the diff was whining or not.
Yeah.
And basically, I pulled the car back into the pits, got all my helmets and everything else, and was next in line and was driver number 3, right? Because they want us there 3 cars before, in line to go qualify.
Yeah. So I'm at home watching at this point. I know you guys are out. I'm in communication. I'm getting word. So I'm like, oh man, let's go. Like you got. I'm sending vibes your way. Like you got this. The team's crushing it, and I'm also like crazy proud of you guys for like for being able to do that. Like I'm like I've never been so proud to be on a team before. Like than that whole event the way it went. So
I went out for my first qualifying, and the thing that we knew was the risk factor that was going to happen happened. Car didn't go into 4th gear.
Yeah, so you didn't enter. You didn't hear entry. The tires did not get lit off for the entry. So that was so. So for
Because
for 3 out of 4 times now, we're going into the not so great 8.
Right. Well, simply put, you got to run 4th gear for the right wheel speed on the OSW bank, and the transmission just didn't go into 4th. And that's a T56 problem in life, and happens to Sasha too, and that's just what happened. I'm going to blame it on driver error, but really, mechanically, there's nothing I can do about it sometimes.
Yeah. So, but the gear's fine.
But yes.
So confirm gear's fine. Oil is staying in the motor, which is always a plus.
Yes. There was nothing weird or smoky or...
Yeah.
Nope, car made it around the track. The diff did not... that was the other question, is if the diff was good. Diff was good.
Diff was good.
So just went out for the not so great qualifying.
And got in.
Yeah, I mean,
But...
you also turned. We were worried about their oil being up on the front tires too. So.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah, we had been
Right.
we had been cleaning the front tires to get all the oil out of the grooves and off of the fronts.
Yeah,
we
'cause-
went through 2 cans of brake clean,
Mhm.
trying to just
Yeah.
make sure the front tires didn't have any oil in them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Especially with the wall there. So you've only done 3 laps the entire day, 2 of them being qualifying laps, and you get in. You qualify in the second.
Well, and special note, if I wasn't in the not so great qualifying, I didn't take a midline qualifying
Oh, yeah.
run this time. My
Yeah. qualifying
qualifying score was
Right.
in the 80s and would have qualified
Oh,
in
yeah.
3rd.
Your qualifying run was
Yeah. This was from, again, going back to the test day we did, which is why I was so optimistic going into OSW, like for you, was like, no, like you could do real good here,
Oh, yeah.
barring like cars running away from you or something like that. But in terms of like line and getting the car where it needs to be, like this could be a strong round. So you have a would-be qualified 3rd as far as points, but
Right,
you're
but-
just down. So
Yeah, I'm in the 32.
I think you went up against Steven, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
well
Who also had
But-
an issue.
before that.
Oh
What
yes.
happened
So we were
What happened was
well when you came off, the car was overheating.
Yes.
quote unquote.
Quote
Air
unquote.
quotes. The car was overheating. So immediately I jumped to, we're grabbing bags out of the coolers and we're putting ice in the intake. We're popping holes in water bottles and spraying down all the coolers, spraying down the radiator. We're like, let's get the car cooled down. And then
By the way, also helped with getting some of the fire retardant that got
it also
on the
helped
car.
too.
Little crevices.
Simple function.
So it was get the car cooled down so that we can do tandem practice, because we were thinking it was just like organically overheating. And then when you came back, it was about a 20-minute break that we had, and then
Enough time to hit the John
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
come back and try to relieve some cramping with a banana.
And then when you fired the car up, you were like, it's 260 degrees. I'm like, there's no way. How? So, thought it was an air bubble, ended up bleeding, no air bubble. And that's when I was like, do you have a thermal gun? And we started checking everything, and all of the temperatures were correct. And
What'd you find?
we decided, we diagnosed that it was a coolant temp sensor. So I went in the trailer to get a coolant temp sensor, and I came out, and he was holding the contents of the coolant temp sensor in his hand. And I did not think that was a thing, or know that was even possible. I did not think they were two combined pieces. I had never thought about the internals of a coolant temp sensor.
So to be clear,
Disintegrated.
the
Yeah.
stem was still in the block, was still in the head.
Yes.
Of the coolant temp sensor for an LS in the front. The stem is still there. The rest of it, not so much.
Yeah.
I'm impressed that happened. I still have no idea how. But
20 years, never seen it.
yeah, it had to have gotten like hit or something like that.
Yeah.
When it had ran or something.
I should have saved it for the fail wall,
Oh, it
but
needs to go.
I did not. It didn't win the garbage.
Yeah.
So then you guys go into kind of scramble mode again.
Yeah.
Right now you're right
For
back
a second time.
right back into scramble mode to like, okay, like sit rep, what do we do? Right? Like
Well, originally he goes, fire it up and see if it leaks.
Yes.
So we fired it up, and I was like, it seeps. We're good.
oh,
So
you guys called me about this.
yeah,
right,
so then
right.
we were going with different solutions. So I said, well, if it's not going to overheat, let's run without it. But with the map setup and stuff like that, you have to have the coolant temp. So my initial thought was, let's zip tie it under the intake.
and I get the second call of the day for this, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm pretty sure like you can't do that because of some of the. There's feedback from the coolant for
And
some
that's
of the
exactly
tables.
what I told him about. If
Yeah.
I'm not at 160, it doesn't
Yeah, I
unlock
wouldn't have done
a
it.
lot of the different parts of the tables and the timing.
And nitrous and everything.
And
too,
it was
yeah.
mostly the concern about nitrous. I don't,
Right.
unless the car is operating correctly, with how
Yeah.
big of
Yeah.
a nitrous I'm spraying, I don't want to operate the car unless it's running right.
Yeah.
So fun fact: John plugs the coolant port in the other head with a coolant temp sensor that doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't have the plug-in.
Yeah.
Yes, I broke it many years ago
Yeah.
between
I know.
cars and
Yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, the other head's plugged with a coolant temp sensor. So we decided we're gonna put the coolant temp sensor in that head, and we're gonna
The spare one you got on the trailer.
we're gonna put the spare one in that head and run the cable over. So John and Chris start unrouting the cable to see if we can plug it in, and I start pulling coils and getting spark plug wires out of the way so that I can get to this coolant temp sensor, which I now have loose and in my hand along with
How much hot
Cool.
coolant?
yeah. Can confirm 165 degrees. The motor was running perfect. So
Judging by the redness of your arm.
Yeah, so
give or take
I-
a few degrees.
So I'm changing the coolant temp sensor. They're getting the wire routed over, and we didn't have wire, so we had to use the AM probe or the multimeter wire.
Oh no, I had Chris found my jumper wire that I made to drain the fuel cell. So I just cut that and,
but-
remade that.
But in a
didn't
pinch.
we didn't have designated spare wire. We didn't
Yeah.
have a crimper. You know, there's a lot of stuff obviously, you know, that we kind of took note of that we
But it again, like if round 2 was like everything organically gelled, like this round there was like no bubbles. Like it just worked out perfectly. Like Chris was in communication with Rich and like finding stuff. I was able to like wrench. John was able to wrench with me. We had my girlfriend there that we asked for tape, and instead of going in the trailer, she just disappeared and came back with tape. It was amazing. I don't know where she got it from, but everything just worked out perfectly to where as soon as I had the sensor on, the only thing we were waiting on was like me getting the coils back on. And then John was in getting suited up, and we got out just in time for one run of tandem practice.
which they almost didn't let me run because I was sitting at the line, and from all the water coming out, it was getting a lot of steam from those header wraps. They do their job, but man, do they suck.
I hate them. That's why I
like-
don't use them.
They get fiberglass everywhere, and like anything touches them, you have to let it burn off for like 5 minutes at the highest temperature you're gonna run.
It's
one
definitely a
thing-
double-edged sword.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there waiting to go out to just try to get a lap in tandem because I don't know what's going to happen. And I had a game plan to run third, which wasn't good enough. But anyways, and the guy at the line was freaking out because remember, I caught on fire earlier that day. I shut down the track for 45 minutes due to oil all over the track. And now I'm sitting here in line with smoke coming out of my hood everywhere. I had to convince him and promise him it was just water, don't worry.
Yeah.
And got one tandem lap, but the guy halfway through outer zone 1 shut it down, so it was really just a confirmation that the car would drift in third.
This is your 4th lap all day.
Correct.
So and now we have to do against Steve Tassinaro, who's like no slouch. I mean, I think
Solid.
he's third in the. I mean, he had like a fluke thing, I think, to get him to not qualify first run, but yeah, like right out of the gate, it's like okay.
He had the same issue that we had of transmission issue.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, 4 runs and then cool. Let's do this.
Yeah, I think Steven's the best driver out there.
Yeah, he's up there.
Finished third in the points overall, and
Yeah.
like
in my mind, like very, very solid. Like every run I see is solid. If I were to propose a goal for next year, it would be to
Beat him.
beat him
Yeah.
if we go up against him, because he is a very solid driver and like a good mark to set a sight on.
yeah. Well, Steven, if you're ever gonna watch this and listen to this,
Yeah, absolutely.
no homo. I've been looking up to you all year.
Yeah,
And
we really like you, but we're gonna beat you next year.
yeah. No, the goal has always been to get to your level.
Yeah.
And beat you. So that's gonna happen next year.
Yeah.
So we end up losing that battle. It's the first time we get to speaking of
we
beating
said
him next
that.
year.
We lost that battle.
We lost that battle.
Dun 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 and more.
Right.
Yeah, lost that battle. You know, I had a good. I qualified lower than him. He was 16, I was 17. So I chased first. First time actually ever chasing on the bank.
With like a car that's smoking, like putting out a lot of like whiteout smoke.
You mean a car that doesn't straighten halfway through the bank and then pulls off?
Yeah.
That was when that is the moment when I learned that not only do I need to try to actively crash into their door, I need to stay inside. So from here on forward, my motto in chasing is stay inside, crash into them. Stay inside, crash into them. Because I got blinded by the smoke, took a guess, and was completely wrong. Went 4 tires off.
And also, again, like, even with that OSW practice day, like, how many laps was that in total? Like, under 10 laps, like, in that car on the...
Completed laps or attempted laps?
No, well, I mean completed laps. Like, so the muscle memory of, like, where everybody's gonna run that still, too. And then added the smoke and added, you know, being slightly outside is...
Yeah. So,
you know,
I think walking out of going definitely for I think all of us, we've all kind of like we saw the capabilities of the team as a whole, like coming together, overcoming major obstacles, and just like no quit. Like we were just gonna go down with an absolute fight, no matter what. I saw a huge change in your confidence in your own abilities coming out of that event. I'm sure we all saw it.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like all of a sudden you were like, oh no, I can do this. All right, like round 4, it's on. I think too, like you had the ability to drive to the limit of the car, and where like the car, now the car is holding me back. And I think that was the first glimpse that you saw of that, really.
Right. Well, I didn't really see it myself because that whole round, I knew that as long as the car got into 4th gear, I could put down a good run. It was, good, like getting over that constant hurdle of, is it going to go in 4th? Is it going to go in 4th? Is it going to go in the 4th?
Yeah.
But yeah, pulling off that track after Steven, remember I said in the beginning, embrace the suck. It turned into, I'm looking forward to OSW next year. I'm going to come out and put people in the trailer because I can put down a lead line. I just need a little bit of seat time in that practice because I know where I'm supposed to be now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're definitely solid on OSW. Like just from your lead runs, like if you can get the tandem line of OSW, like solid.
Yeah. So the whole team really, like every element of the team left OSW. It was like by far the hardest event, and I think for a lot of people, they would have walked away just completely defeated. I think we all walked away from OSW going, that was a win.
I was hyped.
Yeah,
I would do that day all over again.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Including the fact that I left work, went to OSW, and then went to work.
Yeah, 36 hours.
Right? 36 hours is my limit. I get a little weird after 36 hours away.
But yeah, other than being there in person, that was a big game changer for the whole team. It was like the worst day, but the biggest impactful day. And I think that's one of the things I love about our team is we don't get defeated in those days. We just kind of take from it what we need to, and are like, all right, like we now have the confidence that we can get through a day like that, right? That's no longer like a question mark. Like, oh no, like we have the stuff to do it.
Yeah, no, it's just a bad day. Figure out the problem and keep it moving.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went from gelling and coming together to, all right, here's the worst case scenario. How do you do?
To add to your military terms today, improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the definition of that day. So now the whole team's like, oh, round 4 is gonna be fun. Like we're about it for round 4. So we show up. We camped the night before. We had a great night before. Hanging out at the trailer and
had to peer pressure you a little bit.
Yeah. But we made it happen. I'm super glad I did. And we all showed up kind of like, game faces on for round 4, like ready to rock. And that was a tough technical. There was especially like one element of that track that was real tough, where you're coming out of outer zone 2 into interclip 1, and we figured out pretty quickly, you've got to get your momentum down before coming into that interclip to like actually make that line happen.
Right. So before we start talking more technical stuff of what happened that day, do you want to remind me what our 3 goals were?
All right.
I was about to bring up
Sorry.
the 3
Okay.
goals.
So yeah, we had 3 goals
Because so far this year, how many times have I caught on fire?
2. Okay. So yeah, fair point. Don't catch fire. Qualify the first time out. Don't go into a 32. And we had noticed, and I want to add to this. We had noticed that we were within striking distance of like Davey Peoples. Okay. And I wanted, before everyone starts like getting all like crazy because we're calling him, sounds like we're calling him out. This is really a compliment to him, right? He's done a good job kind of like marketing himself and being like a recognizable person. So
yeah, at OSW where he didn't compete, how many Davey People shirts did
yeah,
you see?
Yeah, so
like 15, 20 shirts.
Yeah, so he kind of became like a benchmark for us on the season standings list to say, hey, like if we go and we do pretty well, like we could jump ahead of him and move up in the rankings some.
In the same vein that Steven is a goal for next year.
Exactly.
Beating Steven in a battle would be a goal for next year.
Yeah, so really like if for some reason he hears this, like this isn't hate, this is frankly a compliment.
Yeah.
But we went into that going like, hey, those are our 3 things. Yeah. Get ahead of him in points, whether he's there or not, which unfortunately didn't make it. Don't catch fire and qualify first time out. And we qualified first time out. There's no fire, and we ended up doing that. So
yeah. So now you can go backtrack into.
All right.
I thought there might have been a fire because you almost jinxed it because we were coming back from the first practice, and you were like, "We haven't caught fire yet." And I'm like,
oh yeah.
And then you guys told me that after I got out of the car, and I was like, "Great."
Open my big mouth.
Taboo.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
So for first practice out, the car seems like it's running strong. You're really confident, which, man, like that does so much as a driver. Just to go into having confidence, I think, like is a game changer in itself. And you right away started laying down, decent laps that I started to see like, oh, we're not just trying to get 80% of the way there. We might be working in the last 20% of like cleaning up lines and stuff, which okay, like this is the first time all season where we're not just talking about distances, we're like really getting into some of the more nuanced stuff.
Yeah, so I'm no longer like, if I got to put it in an outer zone now, I'm no longer like in this like 3-foot margin of space of where I'm pointing the car. I'm now in more of a 6-inch plus margin of where I'm putting the car. I know where the rear of my car is. I know where the front of my car is. I know what the car likes to do when you don't lift off the throttle. I know how much I can slow the car down under angle with handbrake or with foot brake, how much left foot brake I can actually give the car before it says, no, I'm going to straighten up on you or bog. I'm very finally well tuned with the car.
Yeah, and it was like super apparent. I mean, just spotting with you, like, and we had really done a good job too. Like after the first practice session, we went to the trailer, drew out the track like we normally do, and said, okay, here when I say this is the area I'm talking about. And we kind of like dialed in some of the language, and we were just kind of all firing on all cylinders. So, and you had some phenomenal chase runs in practice too. Actually, with Steven again with Tasnero.
Yeah, my chases in practice weren't half bad.
No.
I would argue that while my biggest struggle that weekend wasn't necessarily what you were focusing on with interclip 1, my biggest struggle was getting the run up correctly. Because now, instead of putting the car up there, I don't lift. And I run the car hard up there. And I don't know if you noticed, this was the first time that I was purposely flicking the car. I was not doing a straight line handbrake pull like I was doing in round 1 and round 2, and like I've always been doing at OSW. I was purposely doing a minor Scandinavian flick because it was allowing me to set up for outer 1 better than doing a handbrake pull.
Yeah, I could hear it, but from
Yeah.
my vantage point where I was trying to look at the more technical part of the track, I couldn't see it at all. It was out of
Right. So
view.
my struggle was with the way that the car brings on power with the nitrous, getting the car to like part of it is all timing and what the car wants to do, and the other part is no, not yet. Don't go out there yet. So it was just figuring out while all the bumps and grooves were in turn 15 to make sure that it wouldn't flick too early. Because the whole first practice, I just kept dialing the car because it was entering before I wanted it to. I wasn't choosing to enter early. The car was choosing to enter early, and just getting a wrangle around the car.
Yeah.
With noticing the flick, so like at OSW, just during that practice day, when you got a little frustrated and you like drove the car super aggressively, that aggressive style really suits you. Like the flick entries and like driving full committed, like aggressively, like your style is starting to come. Like as you're getting more comfortable in the car, like the aggressive style is starting to come out, and like everything's coming together, and it's starting to.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one thing to note, and this is where I'm going to give the judges a little haze on this one, is they told us in the driver meeting, we don't want to see you do a straight line approach with a big handbrake pull from 3 cones back. There's no way you can do that. We've all driven this on the fun days, and we're still picking up speed on the way to entry. Judges, I was on limiter, flicking the car after the 2 cone in order to make it to the 1 cone and then pull handbrake. I had no more speed left in the car. I was at full speed and already, sideways at the 1 cone. So I was having to pull handbrake. There was no way to avoid it.
Yeah.
So just by the way.
I think some of their adjustment, and we did this in the drivers' meeting, was I think from their perspective, they weren't considering the momentum that you guys were building up, that in the entry and from hours on 1 to 2, some of the majority of the cars that were running, decent horsepower were building up quite a bit of steam. And if you didn't get that under control before that inner clip, you were just going to completely go, get away from it. So we get that figured out.
Yeah, we were running limiter from the end of outer 1
Yeah.
to the point that I pull handbrake for outer 2.
But it was like very light, like it was just into it, and then getting into it. So it was.
You kept it smooth.
The gearing was pretty well for that. Like worked pretty well.
I'm very excited for the gearing next year to just see how much grip we can actually throw at the car, because I think the wheel speed was perfect.
Yeah.
So we get into qualifying, and you lay down a pretty heater of a qualifying run.
Yeah, almost top 3, 74.
Yeah, so we qualify 4th right out of the gate, first shot.
It was.
I'd say we were all pretty hyped on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish the live stream had audio, because I would have loved to have heard how excited Tiny got.
Yeah.
Because he was excited when I put down a good run at OSW for my second one. So to see me do it one shot go after seeing a bunch of people basically not complete laps.
So box check number 1, technically, we qualified first run out.
Box check number.
We didn't know it at the time.
We
but
didn't
yeah.
know at the time.
Yeah.
We checked too.
So we're on fire yet, but there's still day left.
Yes.
So,
lots of day left.
So we go straight in the top 16, and so there was another driver out there. It's funny enough. So spotting, I'm taking notes of who's doing what, and one driver, was struggling, and they're a good driver, just wasn't their day, wasn't their setup, and they were kind of like the one driver I did not want to go against, just because
there was 2 drivers.
there was 2, but just because it would have been a challenge to follow them, cleanly. It's easy for them to make a mistake and you to, make one as well. Or if you give them too much room, they could end up just absolutely like doing a great job. Like you just didn't know what was going to come.
Right, and this was actually a good conversation that, luckily being close friends with pitting with Steven was that, Pat Gooden is his spotter. And I remember going over to him and being like, I'm worried about these guys. I'm not at a skill level yet to pull it back.
Oh, so by the way, we end up being in the bracket with them from 16 on. 16 is the first driver, and then if we get to 8, it could be this other one. So we end up with both potentially.
Yes, we ended up with both.
Yeah. So Pat gave you some. Yeah.
Pat gave me the advice that I expected to hear, but just needed somebody to actually confirm it. and it was, hey, if you have to pull it back, the margin is tiny, and you're going to screw it up until you have practice of actually pulling it back. And he was like, I even made those mistakes at FD after years of doing it right. So I kind of looked to the guys and said, hey, I'm not ready to do that yet. Luckily, this is the last round, and I have the whole off season to fix anything on top of motor and everything else. It's like, so I'm going to put the car where I'm supposed to, and whatever happens.
Yeah. So what ended up happening is the top 16 driver ended up not being able to. They were having car troubles and stuff, which is unfortunate. I didn't necessarily want to see that, but it was a little bit of a relief to not have to worry about their car and yours. You know what I mean? Like, we don't want to hit somebody, but
I don't want to buy run because seat time is extremely valuable. I learn something every time. I'm progressing every time. So it was nice to have a buy run, but I was bummed that I didn't have to battle for it.
Yeah.
Even if I got it on a technicality or whatnot, just being in that competitive, like, it's battle mode now. You only get, how many battles have I had this season? I had as many battles in the last round as I had all season.
True, yeah.
So, I've only had 6 actual battles this year. So they're super hard to get. So I want them.
So you advance. The other driver were a little concerned about following advances. You really do have to battle them.
Right, and they advanced on the same thing. We both had buys in the 16 due to competitors having car problems and not being able to make it out there.
So luckily, we ended up getting through. On your chase, they do put a lap together, and you chased, and it was, I believe it was their, which was the lead or the chase that they spun out.
So let's take a side note here, and this is the first time ever that I lead first.
Oh yeah.
Because all year I've been in the not so great qualifying, so I was always chasing first, which was an advantage because basically the termination of the battle was going to be how well I could chase them, because as we sized up everybody, pretty much everybody I battled this year, we sized as a better driver and or more car on paper. So this is the first time where it's I lead first. How well you do behind me will indicate to me how much do I have to worry about what's going to happen when I chase you.
Yeah, and you did. So you chased and you did okay.
But he didn't.
Well, I couldn't see that though.
Right. So at the time, I got the radio call. You got to do the thing. Got to put it on his door. Yeah. When in actuality, he zeroed behind me in outer 2.
Right, but I couldn't. From our vantage point, without the drone shot, you couldn't see that. So
right.
Yeah.
Unless you were watching the live stream, you had no idea that he zeroed behind me.
Which is not in real time when you're at the track, by the way. It's delayed. So even though we do have the live stream on, you can't see that. So I gave you the call that no, you're gonna have to actually like put it on him and not give him slack, based on how the rest of the run went. And so he ends up spinning out in front of you pretty quickly on the lead run, and
that was super awkward because I've never. Normally when that happens on the sim or at the fun day, like there's enough space back there and you're not as fully committed and you can, kind of like take a breather, readjust your line and go around. No big deal. But this is the first time this has happened in competition, and when he transferred early on like the outside part of the track towards the airfield and the grass, there's only like half a second split of time where I'm going, oh shit, I have to transfer the car now. Oh no, how do I slow the car down? Because I'm now behind him and we're like parallel on track. And how do I save this and follow him instead of just going, whatever, and driving around? And then when he fully spun, I was like, oh, phew, pulled handbrake and just finished the course. But there was a moment where I was freaking out.
Went through all the stages of grief. And
now like I'm literally on the fence, like banging the fence, on the wall, because I know we're in the 4. Like I'm not even waiting for them to make the call. I know we're in, as a team, like holy crap, we're going to the final 4, which was
because I didn't even straighten behind him.
Yeah,
I almost straightened, but like they can't even ding me for that.
Yeah. So now we have Steven Tassinaro. Right in the final 4 battle, so it's like, all right, well, like let's give him a run. Like we felt confident we could.
I told him I was coming for him. in the
Yeah,
Final
we
Four.
could give him a competitive battle. You know.
Yes. What I was most excited about in the Final Four wasn't actually competing for the podium. It was actually getting the drive 2 more times. Because it's Pro-Am, we get the battle for third. So I was just ecstatic that regardless of what happens, if I beat Steven, even better. But regardless, I get to go do another battle, for third place.
Yeah.
So that was the highlight for me, more than anything else about potentially getting on the podium.
Yeah. So you end up battling him, and I think you had a little mistake on your chase, and Steven ends up taking the win.
No, I had an okay chase. I made a mistake in the lead.
Oh, lead. I apologize.
So, Steven, you sneaky bastard, you threw on some grippier tires and took me and gave me a little bit of that gap sauce. But so no, in my chase, he gapped me a little bit onto outer 2, but that was kind of the story of chasing with my car. There's just nothing left in it, and that's what was going to happen. And then I was a little wound up in the interclip transition that I had to cut. Before his car would kind of float a little bit more and wasn't as hooked up. But like when he got back on it, and as I was milking the transition, he just started going. So I just cut line big time. So I had just a big deficit in the chase. It was the lead where I really screwed up, and it wasn't on purpose. I don't really think it was an overhyped thing. I think that I was just slightly off on my flick and my handbrake application, because normally the way that I had to drive that car that round, and it's all based around grip, which is based around our horsepower, was I couldn't put the car on the back line of every zone and drive the arc that the zone was. But didn't have enough power and grip to do that unless we sacrificed the complete other zones.
Yeah.
So if I entered the zone on the beginning of the box, so shallow but in the box, the beginning of outer zone 1 and 2, basically whether it was on throttle application, like for outer zone 1, my arc would take me to the back of the box, whereas in outer 2, it was more of a handbrake foot brake that would set me back. But basically I started outer 1 at the back of the box, and when you hit the rumble strips, it's kind of a ticking time bomb, because the rumble strips are not asphalt. They're painted.
They're slick, yeah.
They're painted. So not only is the tire doing this every 12 inches, but you're also on paint. So as soon as I entered the back of the box, I was just kind of like, just try to save it. And, kind of went deep, got my line screwed up, and just was like, all right, well, I'm going to try to just complete the course as smoothly as I can. And that route appeared to me as cutting back across towards outer 2. Whether I made it to outer 2 or not didn't matter to me, but towards outer 2, and giving me enough room and momentum to make the transition to just actually then do a perfect outer 3. But I knew from how much that I dropped the tire and how much I missed outer 2 and completely biffed the inner clip that there was no way that Steven had that big of mistakes in his chase.
So he ends up taking the win, and we go against Sasha for third.
Yes, I was super pumped about it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Were you-
Sasha's solid.
And what was nice about both Steven and Sasha is they're just gonna drive the heck out of their car, and you can just drive the heck out of yours, with them. And
Yeah, I would argue there's not really that many games that we experienced in Pro-Am.
yeah, no.
So everybody I battled was a straight up battle.
yeah,
Yeah.
Sure, Taylor Ray had to baby it around, behind me during round 1, but
yeah,
everything was straight up.
Yeah, not as many games. Just somebody who's they're driving solid, and that they're not going to make mistakes, and they're going to drive as hard as they can, and you can drive as hard as you can behind them, and
yeah.
Just see how it shakes out.
And that's what I did behind Sasha. And
Yeah.
my excitement to drive against Sasha was that car for car on paper, there's no other car closer to mine
Yeah, good
on
point.
paper. Sure, there was a 410 wheel horsepower, C5 Corvette, but that's a Corvette, or there's this 460 horsepower Corvette, or you got Stevens, S14 that's making 530 and change or something. but that's 1J, and he's running completely different suspension. Whereas Sasha's wise fab front, I'm wise fab front. We're both V8s. We're both T56. Now, granted, he was probably still on stock diff, but we're both running nitrous. He's only making about 50 to 60 more horsepower than I am. So paper to paper, it's as close as I can actually compare myself as a driver to somebody else. And somebody who I think is better than me. So where are my shortfalls? Where can I take notes to improve against who I look up to for competition wise?
So he ends up edging out a win, and starting a little cleaner, a little better, chasing a little bit better, but I think that was a pretty competitive battle.
It was a very competitive battle,
yeah.
And like both of you had the line figured out really well. Like Sasha was running good all day, like had a good line. You had a good line, and in that battle, like Sasha had a few mistakes, you had a few mistakes. They were in different spots, and it was really just kind of up to how the judge weighed those mistakes. This
is something I want to do. Not sure if maybe it'd be good to do on this platform, or who knows what. But I would love to get Noel on a call and just not to argue the call or anything, because I thought he won. To me, he won. But I would love to hear from the judge's perspective what they were looking at.
Oh, like a breakdown?
But like a full breakdown of just that battle. Because as far as all the other battles go from that day and the event, I would argue that's the closest, most nuancey battle that ProAm has seen this year.
And I think it's where they were looking. So the big mistake that I saw when you go follow runs, you had a slight mistake, inner clip 1 to outer 2, and Sasha had a bit of a straight, and so you had a bit of a straight there. Sasha had a bit of a straight going from outer 1 to outer 2, and it was to my perspective, it was a little bit bigger than yours, but also at the same time, that's maybe a little biased, but it was almost the same mistake, just in different spots. And when I was watching on the stream, I was it just depends on how the judges see, either they're going to see those mistakes as the same and give you guys one more time, or they're going to say, we didn't want to see that in this area versus it's a little bit better in this area, or vice versa.
Yeah, because depending on how the judges weigh different mistakes or different areas of the track, right? It's not the traditional scoring anymore where outer zone 1 is 20 points and outer zone 2 is 10. It's not weighed that way, so you can't judge, for example, I totally chased better than him in outer 1.
Yeah.
But because I did that, it kind of screwed me up for outer 2, whereas his screw up in outer 1 in the chase set him up perfect for outer 2. So if there's a sacrifice, which one do the judges
and
like
what
better
I think is
or hate least?
The reason that I think that Sasha ended up taking the win is that maybe they judged the technical portion of that track. Inner clip 1 to outer 3 was a real technical portion of that track, and if they viewed that as more important, then it was your mistake was in that area. So even though it was probably slightly less of a mistake, it was in an area that they were really hawking on. So maybe that's why. But it would be interesting to have a judge's perspective of hey, this is exactly what we were seeing, and this is why.
Right, because when I look at it from lead, because the chase mistakes are pretty easy to see, but if you compare lead to lead, he does beautiful in outer 1 and outer 2, but he misses inner clip. And then outer 3, we both did the same. Whereas I'm sacrificing part of the beginning of outer 1 and outer 2. I'm in it, but I'm not on the back line like he is, but I hit the inner clip. So, as far as the way that I see it, if you miss a zone, it should be more detrimental than sacrificing 2 parts of 2 zones overall.
But it doesn't matter what we think; it matters what the judges think.
Exactly. So I would love to get that kind of confirmation in that thought process.
So either
Or
way,
if there's a weight scale that we're not aware of that they're still kind of using.
so Sasha gets the win, and we end up getting fourth, which was like an amazing accomplishment for the whole team. Like we were absolutely stoked, and I know you got a lot of validation from other competitors and other people in the track. So kind of in like our kind of final parting thoughts. Like I mean,
It was really different to basically kind of be invisible in round one, which was also totally fine. We wanted to be invisible, but to be out there, starting in OSW and be like, I'm a driver here, guys. I'm here to play with the big boys, and I can play with the big boys.
Yeah.
And then to finally put it all out there in round four, and people notice. Notably, Pat Gooden, Kevin Lawrence, Chris Jackson, said something. Sasha, like for them to come over and kind of give the same message in different terms, but to put it simply and to not overwind it, we've watched you, from the back end over here progress throughout the whole year, and your progression isn't the same as watching a brand new driver go out there to the skid pad and learn how to drift. It was, there's a competitive team here that has synergy and that is growing both as driver, car, team, and program. And it was really awesome to watch every round, something new, some sort of improvement, some sort of growth. And, they just thoroughly that they were very happy to see it.
Yeah, I don't know if any of them knows like how much it meant to us to hear them say that, and like as a team, and
thanking them and telling them it meant a lot was not enough.
No.
Enough gratitude that it felt.
Yeah, for sure. So if people enjoy this or want to hear more about kind of things that we're doing, I think it'd be cool to do a follow up on kind of the plans for next year and what some of the changes are. But I think as it stands now, that's 2023 in a wrap, and I'm super. I couldn't be more proud of like everyone on the team and how we did, and I appreciate all of you.
Yeah, maybe we can do a shorter format for like round recaps.
Yeah, exactly.
And get more nitty gritty. We started to get a little nitty gritty and kind of started rambling on round four, but we could do that as a team
each round.
I think it's cool to get the team perspective. I mean, you hear, a lot of times drivers will recap stuff, and you get, I think their perspective obviously means a lot. I mean, they're the driver, but you get kind of the little nuanced background stuff.
Yeah,
it's nice to know that my rear diff is tightened by 2 Ugga-Duggas
yeah,
with
exactly.
a 50% confidence.
It's very scientific.
It was specifically That's the specific torque.
Highly scientific stuff here. So
as I flick
was
it in
more than 50-50, but
as I flick it in fourth gear up on the wall at OSW,
at whatever mile an hour.
Didn't need to know.
you did it. I mean,
all right.
I guess technically you still didn't need to know, but I was more than 50-50 confident. So.
And with that, that's a wrap on 2023.
Yeah.
Cool. Enjoy. Talk to you guys later.